Welcome in. I'm Brady Michael, and today I will once again be hogging the mic, coming to you on March 9th. And it seems like that I can't escape the weather that's occurring in Jonesboro, Arkansas. It is just another rainy, dreary day that I'd rather be inside. So, well, here we are. We made it. This episode is going to be heavily NFL Combine related. We're going to look at Arkansas players in the Combine, how they did, and I'm also going to look at what's going to be a really long segment, so go ahead and prepare for it. Get your popcorn, whatever you think you need. I'm going to look at 3 to 4, it varies, guys in the NFL Combine by position that I think helped, hurt, just impact guys, and then look at who had the biggest boost in their stock and the biggest drop in their stock. Alongside that, I'm going to get to the segment that I was going to touch on last week, which was who are the best available fits or just simply best available transfers on the football market. And actually, that list has changed a little bit since I made it last week, so we'll get to that in a minute. And then I could focus in on the Arkansas-Auburn game happening tonight, as of course the SEC tournament already underway. But instead, we're going to look at my awful predictions for the SEC tournament, because while I made them this morning, yesterday's games, had I picked them, I would have started 0-2. So that's a hot start. Like I said, heavily NFL Combine related this episode. But of course, first, let's get to the housekeeping stuff. You can currently find Hawgin the Mic on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. What am I missing? YouTube, of course. How could I forget YouTube? And I need to give a shout out to the people that hear this on Red Wolf Radio. Here at Arkansas State, being a student here, it kind of feels weird that I'm doing an Arkansas Razorback related show and they are forced to stream it on air. So I love a little bit of irony in that. You can follow me personally on Twitter at bmichael, Michael, replace the I with a 1. And on Instagram at Brady_Michael with Michael the same way. So let's get into first the best available college football transfers for Arkansas, or really just in general. If you have a different team, these are some of your best guys. And let's just say that it's not ideal where we stand. The first thought referring to Arkansas is like, what do they need? And the first thing that comes to mind is still defensive backs, but you obviously have Walcott and Johnson coming in from Baylor already. So that's 2 less holes to fill, but it's still a big problem. Uncertainty at tight end, a lot of youth. Freshman, Tyrus Washington is there. The position group is too young. Now, I'm not saying it's untalented. There's plenty of talent there, but you need an experienced guy. And it's not looking good, at least right now. They obviously lost out on Jake Roberts, a North Texas veteran tight end, a while back. One more linebacker with lack of depth and seniority there would be nice. Antonio Greer's already there. But you need another guy to play alongside Pooh Paul, Jordan Crook, and the like. And you want to take any established big man every single time. Interior defensive lineman, maybe go out and get a tackle, an offensive guard. So, moving into, we're going to go down 5 guys here, more or less. Starting with the tight end market, it's the pits. I've already said it. It's not the desired spot you want to be in where we stand. The guy that I originally had as tabbed for, he was the best tight end on the market, Jaquarius Spivey out of TCU. And he now resides in Starkville, Mississippi with Mississippi State. You know, I could go over his stats. I'll do it anyway. He's 6'5", 245. Coming out as a senior, he had 136 receiving yards last season and 121 in 2020. He would simply be depth if the younger guys were to have taken him over, but obviously you can just rip that up. There are plenty of linebackers from smaller schools that have the potential to have their names, gauge it, take a shot at them. C.J. Rias from South Alabama is one to go after that I think could be a guy that make his way up into the SEC. But I would prefer going after Tyrone Broden's teammate, the transfer from Bowling Green. Darren Anders, he has 2 straight great seasons as a Falcon, and he combined for 201 tackles, 4.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 12 TFLs during those 2 seasons. He's a little undersized, but it's not that big of a deal. But in the SEC, you'd rather get the big guys. We already got Antonio Guerrero. He's a small linebacker. At safety, there are 2 that I like, and I say that hesitantly. Both come from out west, and they both have completely different builds. Ronald Wilson from New Mexico was a bright spot on what has been an awful team consistently for them. Their safeties were actually legit. He was one of a handful. And Adarius Halsey, I think, was another safety that was a stud for them, and he has since gone to Houston. Anywho, Jackson Turner is the other one via Arizona, and he would be the one that I would want to go after. He's 6'2", 210-pound senior, and last year he had 79 tackles, forced 2 fumbles, and also had 2 picks. Keeping it in the theme of defensive back, we're going back to the small schools. Tywan Francis from Colorado State. He had an injury last year, but in 2021 he had 88 tackles and picked up a sack, a forced fumble, and 3 pass breakups. He did play in 4 games in 2022, I should note. And another note, he's from New Orleans. Obviously, that connection, you wouldn't mind having that. Arkansas likes to have that New Orleans connection in there. And then the offensive line portal is one to wait on for the next window, I would have to say. If I had to pick a guy, it was Caleb Johnson. And there's probably tons of Caleb Johnsons in the world, but this one happens to come from Incarnate Word, where he was a second-team all-conference guy in 2020 and 2021. He can play guard, he can play tackle, and he currently sits at 6'6", 330 pounds. And he beats one of the guys in the portal by the name of Bray Cook that we used to be really high on, and obviously that didn't work out for him at Oklahoma. So we shift back to tight end. Is going after one in the portal even going to happen? And so the longer the portal doesn't produce a worthy tight end, the more likely Luke Hasz and Shamar Easter will have to produce day one. Hasz has already been noted as an animal in the weight room by Coach Pittman, to the point, and this was going for Dylan, his brother as well, that Pittman in the press conference said that he called their mom and told them how hard they were working. So that's fun to see. That's culture working its way right there. But moving up to 12 and even 13 personnel, we'll need Shamar Easter to drop the hammer when he arrives in May. And when the current top-rated tight end on On3, their transfer portal, that's what I've been using, is Arizona's Alex Lyons, a sophomore. Bank on your 4-star freshman. Lyons did have 138 yards his freshman season, but was overtaken last year and only picked up 1 catch. So let's go ahead and stick with football. I mentioned this is only the first segment of NFL Combine stuff, but we're going to talk about the Arkansas players that competed in the Combine first. The NFL Combine, one of my favorite sporting events on the calendar, and it has since come and gone and left me wanting more. Which, if you didn't get to watch the Combine, don't worry, I didn't either. I just went through and did as much digging as I could, obviously since I was gone this weekend, family business. There was zero shortage of Razorback representation in Indianapolis. Following the 7-6 year and third year under Coach Sam Pittman, we had 5 guys that were invited to the Combine. Starting on the offensive side, to get a little recap of who went, 4 of the 5 came from that side of the ball. Wide receivers Jaden Hazelwood and Matt Landers earned invitations, and of course, just 1 year at Arkansas. And the other 2 were Dalton Wagner and Ricky Stromberg up front, both of whom have more established and extensive legacy in an Arkansas uniform. Being the lone invite on the defense was Drew Sanders, which no surprise, of course. With the tally of 3 transfers of the 5 spending 1 year and going to the combine, that should carry a little bit of weight. The impact of Arkansas's transfers getting a shot at the NFL should continue to resonate in this next portal opening, assuming it's, worth going after. It could have certainly been a role in raking in the talent that has already come in via the portal. That being said, I don't want to talk about the transfer angle all that much, even though that's something that could become a different segment at a different time. We're here to talk about the Arkansas players. Now, Jaden Hazelwood, will start there. The former Sooner turned Razorback only had 1 season to work with quarterback KJ Jefferson. Coming out of high school as the top dog in his class, hype was left on edge, more or less. Slowly building into a contributor, his junior year provided some promise, and following his best year and departure of head coach Lincoln Riley, Hazelwood then opted for Arkansas, and what followed was his best year yet. He had 59 catches for 702 yards and 3 touchdowns last season, and during his time at Oklahoma, had 62 catches for 736 yards. Now, there was a year where he was injured, so obviously it would have been a lot more had he stayed healthy. At the combine, he ran a 4.66 40-yard dash. He had a 37-inch vertical. He had 10'3" broad jump. He had a 6.98 three-cone, and he also had a 4.31 20-yard shuffle. I should have noted his measurements first. He measured in at 6'2", 215. He had 31 1/4 arms and 10-inch hands. And he finished with a 5.67 grade out of 8. That goes for every player. Every player is given a grade out of 8. He excelled in the passing drills, but he had definitely hurt his stock a little bit with a slower 40 time. And coming out of high school, he's a 5-star, and he's lacking that proof that he earned it. And he does make contested catches. A lot of the things that I'll dive into come directly from scouts. And so that's 2 of his positives was the passing drills and making contested catches, but negative his 40-yard and then lacking what he was given coming out of high school, that 5-star ranking. I think his stock did drop a little bit. Now, he was going to be really iffy on whether he was drafted or not. If he's going to, it'll be probably mid to late 7th, but there's a great chance he'll just be an undrafted free agent. Matt Landers, on the other hand, did help himself a little bit. A player with a career of many branches, Landers showed up for Arkansas last year, coming in via Toledo as a certified freak athlete. He needed to prove that he could hang in the SEC again. He started his career at Georgia, and it didn't work out for him. And then in return, he bombarded the Mid-American Conference. He had 514 receiving yards as a Toledo Rocket, and then he became the leading wide receiver for Arkansas just a year later. One can certainly call last year a breakout season. Even so, he was going to need an excellent day in Indy to push his name up into the drafted category. And like I said, he did just that. Coming in measurement-wise, we always thought he was 6'5". He came in at 6'4", an even 200 pounds, 32.5-inch arms, and 9 1/4 hands. And he was one of the top 40 times in the wide receiver group, third best, I should say, as he ran a 4.37, pulled off a 37-inch vertical, had a 10-foot, 10-inch broad jump, and was just one of the top wide receiver combine performances. And that boosted his grade a little bit to a 5.87. He has proof of athleticism, and that alone boosts his stock. Noted footwork on routes and getting the ball in space. He has great ball tracking through traffic. But then you look at his problems with drops and a lack of him being physical, making some of these catches. So that's something that we'll see if he can develop that in the league. I believe that Landers has pushed himself into a ceiling of a 5th-round pick, but a pick by the end of the draft nonetheless. Moving to Dalton Wagner, let's get down with the big dudes. A man with longevity tagged to his name, Wagner leaves Arkansas after his 6th season. Despite the occasional injury and his minor inconsistencies, he still started 40 games during his career, and he was invited to the East-West Shrine Bowl, of course with Ricky Stromberg, and he got a shot at some of the big names during that game. And we've talked about this before, but if things don't work out, he has the WWE to fall back on if he so chooses. He came in measured at 6'8", 320 pounds, 34 and 3/8 inch arms, 10.5 inch hands, and then getting down to what he did in terms of drills, he had a 24.5 inch vert and 8'6" inch broad jump, and he pumped 24 reps on the bench. And he's ranked as the 23rd best offensive tackle, which seems about right as much as I hate to say it. He has a 5.8 combine grade, and he's been noted for his strength at his size. Now, he does have slow feet. We saw that a lot. He's likely to get beat off the edge more often than not. And it's also been noted that he is likely just a right tackle prospect only, which has its positives and negatives. You don't have to worry about, where am I going to play this guy? He's a primary right tackle. I don't think he'd have success at left with his feet being a primary issue, but he does bring some solid pass protection value, and that'll probably help him get onto a team. Nonetheless, I still don't see him getting drafted, but if he doesn't make his way onto a roster, I would be surprised. Ricky Stromberg, now, I love the Ricky Stromberg story, and it's something that should live on, at least for a little bit. He came in, was forced to drop weight, and ended up being 265 pounds. And needless to say, that's not where an SEC center needed to weigh in at. And despite that, he still started 11 games during his freshman year and did not give up a sack in 2019. Pittman came in and got Ricky Stromberg right, and he started games with his weight back where it should be. Last season in 2021, he was third-team All-SEC, and then last year he was first-team All-SEC and had another year like he started, gave up 0 sacks. Came in at the combine measuring 6'3", 306 pounds, 33.25 inch arms, 9 3/4 inch hands. His 40 time was a little disappointing for his size, but a 5.26 nonetheless. Had a 32.5 inch vert, 9'3" inch broad jump, and found himself rated as the 4th best center in the class, in a draft class that is pretty average at the center position, no one that really stands out. He has a 6.18 combine grade, which equates to him being a potential starter. There's a whole system on that on the NFL website if you want to go check that out for yourself. He's noted for having more smarts than physical ability, as he does have good pre-snap reads, good pre-snap calls, and a very instinctive blocker, especially in the run game. And his feel for the game makes up for what could be called a less than ideal combine performance. And with that, I believe he's just solidified his grade as being a late 3rd to 5th round pick. I would love to see him getting picked up on day 2, but I'd have to say that he falls down to day 3. And lastly, but not least, of course, Drew Sanders. Where does one even begin to appreciate what he did for Arkansas? And speaking earlier on the impact of transfers going to the combine, Sanders is example 1A. A former 5-star player working behind some world beaters at Alabama. His fuse of waiting ran out as staying beneath Will Anderson had run its course, and he was not going to do that for one more year. With the flashes of skill and his freak athleticism put on tape, Fayetteville then became his destination, and playing next to Bumper Pool, they lit up opposing offenses, as we know good and well. It became evident very quickly that Pittman gathered a gem from the hands of Nick Saban. just to mark over his stats from last year: 103 tackles, 13.5 TFLs, 9.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 6 pass breakups, an interception, and a box of chocolates. He was tied in the top 15, 4 sacks last year, first team All-SEC, first team All-American by AP, and should have won the Dick Butkus Award, but he was a finalist anyhow. At the Combine, came in measured 6'4", 235 pounds, 32 1/8 inch arms, and 9 3/4 inch hands. And that's practically all he did. Didn't really run any other tests. He got his measurements and said, I'm out. He comes in with a 6.74 Combine grade, which is the best among every Arkansas player, which he's projected the number 1 linebacker, so I can't say I'm even surprised. He projects as a pass rusher instead of a linebacker, which again, I mean, that fits his play style a lot more. He has great range and speed off the edge, which is why you saw him leaning over the ball more often than you did just standing up next to Bumper Pool and Poop Paul and all those guys. He has tons of playmaker traits. But if we got to talk about some things that he needs to improve upon, scouts believe that he needs a stronger base, so get a little bit more muscle in them legs. And he needs to improve his tackling a little bit. Sometimes when we get caught arm tackling, not really using his full body. Not like there's a lot of negatives with him. Anyhow, so to wrap that up, if all 5 don't find a roster, it'll be a major shock. A major shock. Will Drew Sanders not testing hurt his chances of going maybe a little bit higher? You have both New York teams, Pittsburgh and Washington, have shown interest. Those are like the teams that have shown the most. I'm sure there's more. And when you look at where they stay in the draft, Washington and Pittsburgh hold the 16th and 17th picks, respectively. So do they bite on Sanders at that point, or do they trade down a few spots with Seattle, who's a team on the potential quarterback market, or do the New York Giants get a steal at pick 26, or likewise, do they trade up themselves? With the Chargers and Ravens owning multiple young stud linebackers and edge guys, they aren't sleeper teams to pick him at picks 22 and 23. The Vikings at 24, however, are my sleepers team to land Sanders. They have an aging defense with Jordan Hicks, Danielle Hunter, so that might be a team to watch there. How late will Lander's 4.37 speed stay on the board when it comes down to day 3 of the draft? As is the case for Matt, a lot of quarterbacks would probably love to give him a test drive when camp opens. And does Wagner have more than a year or 2 in him if he finds a team? It feels like the Dan Skipper situation all over again. Obviously, he's not as big, but whenever you look at how Dan Skipper's career fared, it was not an easy start. Matter of fact, quite rocky, as it took him a little bit to finally start some games. And then in Detroit, he did find his footing a little bit, and the rest is kind of history. And here we are in the offseason. All right. So I mentioned how bad my picks were for the SEC tournament. As I sit here, Ole Miss is taking on Tennessee, and I need to go check on that. But before getting into the TwitterCon, how could I not give out my meaningless projections? Tournament, as I mentioned, got going Wednesday. Like I said, my first 2 picks, had I made them for round 1, was going to be wrong. I think Ole Miss and South Carolina was a toss-up, and I would have picked South Carolina. And then not many people had LSU beating Georgia, but Georgia just kind of fell off a cliff. And here we are today. So the first game of the day, got to watch it while I was at the gym, was Mississippi State and Florida, and it was a heck of a game. I had Mississippi State winning, but I did not have it being that close. And then you look down at the other matchup that was already set in stone coming into the tournament, and that's Auburn and Arkansas. Auburn is coming off a win versus Tennessee, and Arkansas a loss to Kentucky, Bama. Yeah. I'm still going to pick Arkansas. They're coming in favored by 3.5 unless the line has changed. My gut tells me to do it, and it's kind of a back against the wall situation. Moving on, like I said, not going to really go in depth with that game. Vanderbilt, as a 6th seed, will beat LSU. I really don't have any problems about that. I would have had them beating Georgia as well. Now, I really was scared with the matchup Tennessee was going to be getting, and in this case, it's Ole Miss. Since Tennessee's been so inconsistent, I could easily see them losing. Right now, they're up by 7. I had them winning this game nonetheless, so maybe they'll hold on and keep me from looking even more stupid than I already feel that I am. Moving on to round 3, you have Bama and Mississippi State, which I have predicted and will actually be the case. I have Alabama moving on out of that. Then I have Missouri that will face Tennessee. Missouri being in the double bye just is really weird. And I have Tennessee beating Missouri. And then you have Texas A&M versus Arkansas. I have Texas A&M, no comment, beating Arkansas. And then Kentucky and Vanderbilt. Kentucky lost to Vanderbilt not that long ago. A little hop, skip, and a jump away. I think Vanderbilt upsets them again. So Vanderbilt to the semifinals against Texas A&M. I think that's where their little happy run ends, and I think Texas A&M makes it to the championship. And then you have Bama and Tennessee, two teams that are really shaky down the stretch after great starts. I think Tennessee beats Alabama, and that hurt to say. It really did. If you couldn't hear the pain in my voice, I'm going to have to refresh a little. So the championship game I have is Tennessee and Texas A&M. Tennessee will finally just lose it. Texas A&M won't need to hold their breath when it comes down to Selection Sunday this year. And, of course, last year, a lot of people think they got snubbed, and I'm a part of that club. But I digress. Let's go ahead and get into the TwitterCon. I can probably just go ahead and wad that piece of paper up that I just read from and chunk it, just like most of my March Madness brackets are anyway. So the TwitterCon, for those that are new, is, first off, I should say, if you heard my Twitter at the start of the show, I consider myself a proud member of the Arkansas Twitter community. And so the TwitterCon is my gauge on how dangerous or woeful Arkansas Twitter is or will be in the coming days. And I use a scale like the TorCon from the Weather Channel, as they do to rate the chance of a tornado in an area. Well, that's exactly my scale. So let's get into what's kind of gone down. The Kentucky loss, it was whatever. The refs were horrendous. Had people saying, maybe we just aren't great. Let's just skip the tournament, please. The floor, however, is still March Madness, despite how much we might sweat when it comes down to Selection Sunday. Everyone more or less just said, dang, collectively, and moved on and turned on baseball, because that was a happy spot this past weekend. Wright State came into town, and they left with 3 losses on their record. Minor stress. One game was even a walk-off in the 8th to just no need to play the 9th. They were our punching bag for the weekend, and Jared Wagner has adopted what Michael Turner called himself as a rental player. Seems like these rental players are pretty darn good. Jared Wagner fully embodying it, and his average is sitting above 400 still. Army came in and was the 3rd straight midweek heart attack game. Kendall Diggs saved the day again. So does that mean he has like a bat signal thing, but it's like Kendall Diggs' face? We need something like that. People want a nickname for him. And I guess I could say I'm a part of that. I've seen some people throwing nicknames out. Some of them I can't say. Some of them I don't want to say. And some are just dumb. Anywho, the SEC tournament's here, which everyone has a helpless feeling, really nerve-wracking, because you can't lose to the slime ball that is Bruce Pearl. Again, Selection Sunday looming just adds to the collective nerves. There's some other stories going on, like the Ja Morant, who was under the Ja Morant story. He was under police investigation, which has since been dismissed for I'd have to pull up the story to get everything. Yeah, he was under further investigation in Denver when he showed a gun on his Instagram Live, which also created the possibility that the gun was on the Memphis Grizzlies plane. And while his suspension from the NBA still could fall into place, it could be a maximum of 50 games just for having the gun on the plane if that comes out to be true. A lot of Arkansas Razorback fans are Memphis Grizzly fans, so that's kind of a big story there. There's a person by the name of Big Content Guy that is like partially an Arkansas fan, I think. I haven't quite got a read on him. He's really hard to get a read on, minus some other things, if you know who I'm talking about. But he had a tweet about Jaws' situation and said his Uber Eats driver being 3 minutes late, and then it was a video of just a dude popping off a bunch of shots. You love to see some Arkansas fans getting some big tweets out there, and that happened to be one that blew up. This being Arkansas, Morgan Wallen's new album got the attention that it deserved. People are throwing their favorite songs out of 36 at you, like 75% of them aren't the same and don't all mention whiskey. You have rumors of Ole Miss signing Chris Beard as their next head coach, which that is just wild but fitting. And there are just so many touch-and-go stories, but let's go ahead and get into the rating for this week. There's just so much nerves and so much emptiness. Selection Sunday alone is going to just boost this rating, and I have it sitting at a moderate 6 out of 10 for this week. And now to continue on with some NFL Combine stuff. This is where it gets real. I'm going to have to take a sip. As I mentioned, I'm going to go through 3 to 4 players by position and give the biggest stock boost and stock drop of every position. And I'm just going to start at quarterback and work my way all the way to defensive back. First guy I want to break down should come as no surprise. He killed it in the Combine. Anthony Richardson, the Florida quarterback, has a 6.35 Combine grade. And he measured in at 6'4", 244 pounds. I had no idea he was that big. I know he was a bigger QB, but not 244. He's bigger than, well, he's about the same size as KJ Jefferson. But he was ranked 11th in production, obviously, as a young quarterback getting his first start. But first in athleticism when it comes to quarterbacks, no surprise. He ran a 4.43, and his 10-yard split was 1.53. Had a 40.5-inch vertical and a 10'9" broad jump. Every recorded athletic test was first among every quarterback in the class, and it raised the question if he had the best combine of a quarterback ever. Now that's a story for another time. But he's almost mechanical when it came to watching him do drop back drills or just drop back into pockets making throws during drills. He did flash a strong arm with his deep ball. Really, really strong arm. He hit Matt Landers on a fly route in stride, and that ball carried at least 50 yards. The guys on TV were really talking about it. And then he had 2 more throws that were easily 55, maybe even 60 yards, and also on the money. So he really, really helped his stock. And we've seen the mock draft of him going number 1 overall. Now, that's not going to happen. I don't care how much of a pipe dream or how much money that you bet on that. It's just not going to happen. But top 5 may not be that wild to think about anymore. And at the end of every player, I'm just going to say whether their stock is boosted or dropped or stayed the same. Clearly, Anthony Richardson, stock boosted. Now, CJ Stroud comes in with a 6.46 grade, and he didn't go through any athletic drills. He just wanted to show off his arm, more or less say, hey guys, I'm still here. You remember me? I played for Ohio State. The crowd did. I mean, they did the combine in Indy, so lots of Ohio State fans there. He seemingly didn't have any bad throws in his short routes, the fly routes, goal line fades, which is a great drill to watch. And he showed how smooth he was as a passer, but no athletic numbers to post. Didn't exactly have the people think any differently, but he did show up and prove once again why he's projected as a top 3 pick, maybe even the first quarterback off the board. His stock stayed the same. I want to bring up Stetson Bennett. He comes in with a 6.00, 6 flat in terms of his combine grade. Measured 5'11", 192 pounds. He ran a 4.67 40, had a 33.5-inch vert, and a 9-foot 10-inch broad jump. It's been noted coming in that age and size are the main negatives working against Stetson, but he showed up in the passer drills. He looked really comfortable in Indianapolis, and with a player comparison to Nick Mullins, if you could pull off a career like that when you're turning 26 for your rookie season, that seems fitting for what he could be. But if you're going to have a Nick Mullins type career, now I'm not saying Nick Mullins is, all that great, but he is one of the most reliable backups there has been. He's fallen off a little bit, but one of the most reliable backup quarterbacks in the NFL in recent memory. If Stetson could replicate that, I'm sure a lot of people would be happy with it. I don't think Stetson would be, but hey, he's getting paid as a backup. So I think his stock is boosted. DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Hard not to bring up a lot of quarterbacks when you're talking about the combine, but he currently sits at a 5.8 combine grade. Ran a 4.56 40 and a 1.51 10-yard split. 32.5-inch vert. Had a 10-foot 1 broad jump, and his 20-yard shuttle was a 4.44. As a 5-year starter at UCLA, experience is definitely a virtue for him. His 40 time made a lot of scouts happy. When paired with his passer drill success, he's leaning as a late round to undrafted guy, but he helped himself a little bit. I'd lean a higher percentage towards maybe a 6th or 7th round pick at this point. So we'll say boosted. And now the biggest stock boost of any quarterback, Anthony Richardson. How could you not see that coming? Then the biggest stock drop of the quarterbacks was Purdue's Aiden O'Connell. And at one point, someone called him a poor man's Jared Goff. And that's really all I needed to hear, but he still didn't perform that well nonetheless. Move on to the running backs. Start with Jahmyr Gibbs. He had a 6.37 combine grade. Comes in listed at 5'9", dropped a little weight, down to 199 pounds. He ran a blazing 4.36 40 and a 33.5-inch vert. Like I said, dropping some weight before the combine. He's mellowing down to more of a scat back role or just a guy that can do both out of the backfield. You want him to be a little bit of power guy? He can do it, but it's probably not going to work out for him in the NFL. Now, that being said, he does run with power, but we saw what he can do. He's great out of the backfield at catching the ball, and he's just great outside the tackles. To have his straight line speed along with how fluid and sometimes mesmerizing he looked in the drills, he surely locked down the RB2 spot, which really wasn't up in the air with Bijan Robinson, the number 1 running back. Gibbs made sure that he plastered his name, said, look, guys, I'm number 2. So definitely a boost for him. If anything, we'll call it stayed the same, because I think when you look at the running back room or the draft, when you look at the draft boards when it comes to running backs, that's the proper terminology. Let me use my knowledge a little bit here. Gibbs and Robinson are there. It's kind of like S tier, A tier, and then you drop a little bit. Next guy up is Chase Brown by way of Illinois. He comes in with a 6.12 combine grade, listed at 5'9", 210 pounds. He ran a 4.43, had a 40-inch vert, 10'7" broad jump, and he repped 25 on the bench. And he's known coming out of Illinois as a power guy that's hard to tackle and is a low-class bruiser, not a high-class bruiser, but his 40 time brought a lot of eyes his way. He's first. He ranked first at the combine in running backs in the vert and broad jump. With the middle section of the running back draft class is loaded, and Brown certainly put himself ahead of the pack, provided that he ran that blazing 40 time to go along with how physical he is. Stock boosted. And then third running back, Devon A-Chain by way of A&M. He comes in with a 6.23 combine grade, listed at 5'8.5", 188 pounds. In a class full of smaller running backs, he might be the best of the small dudes. Came in with the fastest 40 time among running backs at a 4.32, and he also pulled off a 33-inch vertical. A player with as much utility and value as A-Chain already gave him an advantage over the other backs of his size and status in the draft. He's a coverage mismatch out of the backfield, and he's a big chunk play running back. His 40 time makes him a likely day 2 pickup, which was only complemented by explosive drills showings, minus the one dummy and volunteer holding that dummy that he ran over. Well, I could say that alone stock boosted. The biggest stock boost of all the running backs, there wasn't a ton that just really jumped up. I could say Chase Brown, but I think Jahmyr Gibbs, while it's not going to affect where he falls in the mix of running backs, I think he has the biggest stock boost among running backs, jumping up picks. And the biggest stock drop is probably Tank Bigsby. Nothing really stood out at the combine, didn't run well. Everything was average, didn't show off his mobility. It didn't look as fluid as sometimes he would make it look at Auburn. So we'll see what happens to him. He's probably going to fall towards the back half of that big middle chunk of solid running backs. So I want to pair the wide receiver and tight end position together, look at 2 wide receivers and 2 tight ends. Start with Zay Flowers out of Boston College, who comes in with a 6.35 grade. At 5'9", he's 182 pounds, and he added, I believe, this was a post I saw, but 15 to 20 more pounds before the combine. So he was playing really light at Boston College, but he ran a 4.42 40, 35.5-inch vertical, had a 10'7" broad jump, and he had one of the best gauntlet showings. If you don't know what the gauntlet drill is in the NFL Combine, you start facing a quarterback, you catch the ball, you drop it, you turn, you flip to the other quarterback that's 10 yards away, you catch the ball, and then you start running across the field, and you keep alternating sides, catching balls, and then the last one you catch on the far sideline, you then cut upfield. That's for my people that aren't sports fans that might be listening, and all of his catches during that drill were with his hands. He didn't have any come back and hit his body. It looked really natural for him. He's noted for open field skills as a ball carrier, and that 4.42 40 time boosts his value as a slot or an outside wide receiver. Now, 5'9", the first thought is slot guy, but he can work outside with that speed. His biggest negative that was noted by scouts is that he tends to rush his routes, which when you have the speed that he does, I can't say I'm surprised, but a lot of people are talking about Zay Flowers, and I'd love to be one of those guys, so stock boosted. Elijah Higgins, by way of Stanford, comes in with a 6.22 grade, and you say, who in the world is Elijah Higgins, and why are you going to talk about him? Well, there's a reason, trust me. Comes in at 6'3", 235 pounds. He ran a 4.54 40 time at that size. Also had a 35-inch vertical, 10'6" broad jump, and he had a 7-second flat 3-cone. And his grade actually goes up when you project him as a tight end in the NFL. He was another player that had one of the top-tier gauntlet showings, and he needed to be better at contested catches with his size. That might be his biggest negative. But when you run a 4.54, which is near the top of even the tight ends as well, and his chance to be put on the outside at F tight end or just put his hand down, be a regular tight end, it'll be interesting to see what teams think they can do with him. Because when you have a guy with a lot of versatility, if some teams figure it out, he'll find his way onto a team. I think his stock could be considered a slight boost, so I'll say boosted. Darnell Washington, maybe the biggest freak there is in this entire draft that was flying under the radar, not so much anymore. Has a 6.38 grade, listed at 6'7", 264 pounds, and he has 11-inch hands. He ran a 4.64 40, 31-inch vertical, and he had a 10'2" broad jump. He really needed to showcase himself after being behind Brock Bowers at Georgia. He did have that one-handed snag during, I want to say it was the goal line fade drill, and he also was another player with a great gauntlet showing. Effortless when you watch it. He put other tight ends to shame by moving the sled in the blocking drill like it was a fourth grader. And, of course, he's a pure athlete for a giant human, which equals usage as a rookie. That's pretty safe to say. He very well could have the highest ceiling among all the tight ends when it comes down to it. Former 5-star out of high school. That doesn't really matter. He's proven everything. Big stock boost for Darnell Washington. And the other guy I want to talk about is one that I've really liked watching him develop at Old Dominion, and that's Zach Kuntz. It's not the way you think it's pronounced. It's Kuntz. 5.9 grade. He is another behemoth man, 6'7", 255, with long, luscious locks of hair. He ran a 4.55 40 time, which is really blazing for his size. 40-inch vertical, had a 10'8" broad jump, repped 38 on the bench. 20, I said, oh my gosh, 38. Where am I going? 23 bench reps. And he's just another huge human being that's a freak athlete. He had the best vertical, broad jump, 3-cone, and bench, tied for bench, among all tight ends. He is considered very raw, but made sure that he would be hard to pass up on in the draft, at least on day 3. I would say that Zach Kuntz earned himself a little bit of a stock boost. So the biggest boost among the position group probably goes to Jackson Smith and Jigba when you look at the wide receivers, because he's coming off the injury. He showed up, proved why he was so good at Ohio State, and that's what some scouts needed to see among tight ends. Darnell Washington, no surprise. The biggest drop among wide receivers was South Carolina's Jalen Brooks. Just did not run well, didn't look good. He was already a guy that was probably going to be a day 3 pick, and so it really didn't help his odds of being picked up at all. And then among tight ends, all the tight ends showed up and looked average at worst. Most of them showed up and looked great, and that's why Michael Mayer might be the biggest dropper among tight ends, only because he was a guy that looked average but has the really good production. You have guys like Darnell Washington that came up and showed him out. He could very well just find himself beneath a few of the other guys at his position. Moving to the offensive line, this is a great story. I want to start with Andrew Voorhees out of Southern California. He has a 6.24 combine grade and listed at 6'6", 310. He tore his ACL during the combine. You're like, oh my God, is this guy going to have a stock boost? No, he's not, but we still got to talk about him. He was able to do the vert, which he had a 29-inch vert. He also did the broad jump, which was 8'9". And even with a torn ACL, he came back and said, I'm doing the bench. And he repped the most among offensive linemen at the combine with 38. That's where that 38 number came into play. I was getting ahead of myself. He came in as a day 3 projected draftee with plenty of success at USC, but that torn ACL doesn't hurt his stock as much as you would think, but it'll probably push him to a round 7 guy, if not undrafted. I still think he's too talented because he's probably leaning around 4 or 5. I think he's too talented to just leave on the board and risk losing him to another team. He proved his strength while injured, so I think his stock, we're going to have a first slight drop. Stock dropped. All right, Broderick Jones, by way of Georgia, had a 6.44 combine grade. He's listed at 6'5", 311. Listed as the 3rd most productive lineman and the 2nd best in terms of the athleticism grade. Ran a 4.97 40 time, had a 30-inch vert, and a 9-foot broad jump. He came in rated as a consensus top 3 tackle in his class, and he validated everyone's thoughts. His speed and footwork keeps him as a prototype left tackle and not a guy that you would think can just shift over. Obviously he can, but you want a guy like him protecting your quarterback's blind side. and he has the potential to be a long-time starter. He's very, very similar to Andrew Thomas, oddly enough, the former Georgia Bulldog. Stock solidified. Now, Peter Skoronski coming in as the consensus number 1 lineman out of Northwestern. He has a 6.73 score, combine score. Score? Grade. He's listed at 6'4", 313 pounds. Ran a 5.16 40, 34.5-inch vert, 9'7" broad jump, and he had 30 reps on the bench. Now, he could have skipped the combine and still been the number 1 offensive lineman. The only thing is he's projected as a guard while playing tackle, left tackle at Northwestern with his size and skill set. And his biggest knock is that he does have shorter arms, and that was confirmed. I don't remember the exact measurement because I didn't put that down, but I want to say it was 32.25. He's a dominant run blocker, and he has a pretty big need to enhance his pass protection. So a road grader that needs to be able to kick it into reverse a little bit faster. Stock could have been noted as dropped a little bit, but I think stock solidified. It may have hurt him a pick or two, but that's not enough to say that his stock dropped. The biggest boost among linemen was John Gaines from UCLA. He was noted as an athlete coming in, but he tested off the charts, ran great. He put up some great numbers in the vertical, broad jump. They're not ones that I ended up writing down. All I know is that he was listed as first in the athleticism tests according to the NFL website. And he also just looked good on top of that. And then the biggest drop is Jalen Duncan from Maryland, offensive tackle. I should have said Gaines is a guard and Duncan's a projected tackle, but he had no position drills. He did do tests, but he didn't run any position drills. And there was a rumor that maybe he got injured in the combine, and that's why he ended up leaving. We'll see if that marinates into anything. Let's get over to the defensive side of the ball. After I get a breath, I told you I can kind of get on about this. Someone will have to come in here and knock me upside the head, so I'll just shut up by the end of this. Okay. All right, start with the Pittsburgh Panther. Kalijah Cansey has a 6.39 combine grade, listed as 6'1", 281. And you say, whoa, wait a minute. He's a defensive tackle from Pittsburgh, and he's 6'1", 280. I know a guy like that. Well, everyone was on Cansey trying to make him the next Aaron Donald, which, to be fair, a lot line up. He ran a 4.67 40 time at 280 pounds, and he tested first in the athleticism score among defensive tackles. He proved how explosive he was with that 40 time and the on-field drills. Was a must-have, considering that he's 6'1", in terms of showing up and proving his explosiveness. He solidified himself as easily defensive tackle number 2 behind Jalen Carter. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. That's for now. So, stock boosted. And then a guy whose name I didn't rehearse before this, but it's another Northwestern guy. I believe it's Adetomwa Adebare. Sounds about right. If it's wrong, don't come at me for it. He had a 6.12 combine grade, listed at 6'2", 282, so just a touch bigger than Cansey is. The only difference is he ran a 4.49 40 time, the fastest by a defensive tackle, I believe, since the combine's been keeping track of that. He also had a 37.5-inch vertical, 10-foot, 5-inch broad jump, had 27 bench reps, and he checked out of the combine with the most impressive showing among his weight class and position, arguably. He could be played anywhere on the defensive line. He's listed as an edge guy, but you call these guys tweeners, ones that you can play inside, outside. And it comes down to scheme, really. He showed really good footwork and drills to pair with his acceleration. He's a big-time leverage guy with big-time snap explosion. And when you combine all of those together with what he put on display as an athlete, He was projected as a day 3 guy. I don't know if it's going to get him to day 2, like round 3. But there are going to be some teams really after him after the combine that he put on, and so stock boosted. And then the third guy, the defensive lineman, is Jose Ramirez, coming out of Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington? Eastern Michigan. Wrong team with a colored field. He has a 5.95 combine grade. He's listed as an edge rusher, 6'2", 242. And he ran a 4.73 40 time with a 34.5-inch vert, had a 9'10" broad jump, and a 6.95 second 3-cone. He's one of the most natural pass rushers flying under the radar, but showed out in position drills. Has fantastic bend and a great spin move, and then he has the production at Eastern Michigan to boot. He could boost his value as a 3-4 edge rusher or a 3-4 linebacker rather than just a pure defensive end. And I'll go back and just address for those that aren't big football people, 3 defensive linemen, 4 linebacker scheme. He would probably be best fit as a linebacker in that situation. That being said, stock boosted. The biggest stock boost among all defensive linemen had to be Kalijah Kancey with his combine, combined with maybe the biggest drop of the combine, Jalen Carter. Like I said, no need to get into that, but not showing up, having everything going on with him, while he didn't do anything at the combine, it's safe to say that that's going to hurt him. If we want to talk about guys that really hurt their stock at the combine, actually, look at Army's Andre Carter II. Now, he was projected as maybe a first-round guy, and he's a pretty big defensive end, but he only had 11 reps on the bench. That is awful. And then just a little note here I put the end is Byron Young from Tennessee was also another combine star that really boosted his stock. I would say that he's probably second behind Kancey in the biggest stock jump. But we'll move to linebackers. Start with Owen Pappoe from Auburn. 5.89 at combine grade, listed at 6', 225. So I talked about small linebackers earlier. And the transfer portal, well, here's one for you. He ran a 4.39 40 time, fastest among all linebackers. Had a 35.5-inch vert, 10'6" broad jump, 29 reps on the bench. And starting with a linebacker that's, of course, questioned for his height, that was shut down. All the chatter quieted with his explosiveness and strength that he put on display. He's an athlete first, and it comes down to scheme second. He will go crazy going after the ball carrier, and off the edge, he is a play killer. So he does have proof of coverage success at Auburn, and he has played special teams, which as a day 3 guy, if you can get somebody that can contribute on special teams straight off the bat and then maybe develop as a backup, that's what you want to see, and Owen Pappoe is fitting all of those requirements. So stock boosted. It's a big theme for a lot of these guys. Trenton Simpson up next. He had a 6.24 combine grade. He's from Clemson, 6'2", 235 pounds. And at that size, he ran a 4.43 40 time, and he had 25 reps on the bench. He battled a little injury during the combine, and he still ran that 4.4. And he's only spent 3 years at Clemson, so that youth and proven athleticism is massive, considering he can play linebacker outside or inside, will linebacker, edge linebacker, outside linebacker. You get the point. Maybe he could even just shift down to a pure edge if you add a little bit more weight to him, because he has that speed. And he's already pretty big, pretty stacked. He looks great when you look at him. He's a freak of nature. He showed great bend and hip mobility in drills, and he would be a guy that I'd want as my quarterback spy. Not if I was the offensive coordinator, however. And so Trenton Simpson, stock boosted. Jack Campbell from Iowa, the Dick Butkus Award winner. He has a 6.18 combine grade, listed at 6'5", 249, might as well call it 250. He tested first in the athleticism test among linebackers, running a 4.65 40 at 250 pounds and 6'5". He's the biggest linebacker, at least pure linebacker. There were some edge guys like Will Anderson tested with the linebackers. But you want to talk guys that are projected linebackers. Jack Campbell is the biggest. He also pulled off a 37.5-inch vert, 10'8" broad jump, and a 6.74 second three-cone. He's known as a tank in the middle. Posting that 4.6 time was certainly a boost alone for his future versatility. He proved his solid footwork, not great footwork, but solid footwork to pair with the strength that he has as a downhill run neutralizer. And he can really lay into some lead blockers, knock them off their feet even. But he does need a better first step, and that's something that scouts are really talking about. And so Jack Campbell's stock solidified. He's still a freak athlete nonetheless. Shocker, all these guys are at the combine for a reason. The biggest stock boost among linebackers, I really didn't pick one guy. I just want to say Trenton Simpson and Jack Campbell, maybe, because they put linebacker 2 and 3 up for grabs between the two of them. And the biggest drop among linebackers was Cam Jones out of Indiana, already a guy that was leaning, 5th, 6th round. He was 2 inches shorter than his listed height at Indiana. He was listed as 6'3", came in at 6'1", weighed less, ran a 4.69 as a guy that was right there on the fringe of 200 pounds at linebacker. And then you have Campbell out here at 250 running a 4.65. No, you're not helping yourself, and so Cam Jones might find his way into an undrafted free agent situation. Final position group now, defensive backs. And to start with corner, the cornerback class might be the deepest and best class grouping in this 2023 draft. Start with Emmanuel Forbes from Mississippi State. He has a 6.36 combine grade. Listed at 6'1", but only 166 pounds. To make up for that, though, he ran a 4.35 40 with a 1.48 10-yard split, and that's the fastest that I could find among all the players I looked into. He had a 37.5-inch vertical, a 10-foot, 11-inch broad jump, and like I said, 166 pounds. He's a little underweight for measurements, but that fantastic 40 time is good for someone that is considered a quote long corner at 6'1". He does have long arms. The possibility of his best hip flip, that's something that you look at when you look at corners. How quick can they turn their body? I literally just did it right now when I'm talking about it. But they flip their hips to go back and forth and then do their best to stay on track. I think that Forbes proved that he has the second, maybe third best. And that's behind Oregon's Christian Gonzalez, which we'll talk about him in a second. Forbes had 6 pick sixes at Mississippi State, which classifies him as a ball magnet. He may need a little bit more size to play more press man consistently. That was something he did a lot in college and had success in the SEC, so that can't be discounted. But made sure that he's hard to pass on as a potential late first-round pick, and for sure an early second-round stock boosted for Forbes. Now, Christian Gonzalez, as I said, from Oregon, he has a 6.7 combine grade, listed as 6'1", 197 pounds. He ran a 4.38 40 and had a 41.5-inch vertical, an 11-foot 1-inch broad jump, and he had 14 reps on the bench. Now, everyone knew the talent he had coming in, and he still showed out, attempting to lock up the number 1 corner spot. As I was talking about hip mobility, Gonzalez's is insane as he stays on track when twisting about. It just looks more fluid on him than anyone else that did it during the combine. He has really gifted feet that provide him as a guy that can go from 0 to 100 to make up for getting beat off the line, off the press, which even so doesn't happen that much. He was already coming in as the projected number 1 corner. With his testing, I think that he could have even boosted himself a little bit. So we'll say slight stock boost for Christian Gonzalez. And the last guy I want to talk about is Sidney Brown from Illinois. He had a 5.97 combine grade, and this is a safety. The other two guys are listed to play corner. Sidney is 5'10", 211 pounds. He ran a 4.47 40 time, had a 40.5-inch vert, 10-foot, 10-inch broad jump, and he had 23 reps on the bench. Now, he is the brother of running back Chase Brown, who I brought up earlier. But Sidney is overlooked in what was a combine filled with a handful of Illinois defensive backs. And when you look at his testing, he tested above the 97th percentile among safeties in every category: bench, broad, vert, his 40 time. And to talk about his play a little bit, he's a big-time run stopper with straight-line speed. That's really about all he brings to the table. His size may be the thing that hurts him down the road, being 5'10". He is bulky for his height, so that's something to note. We'll see if he can improve his pass coverage when he finds his way onto an NFL team, and there's a great chance that he'll be an early day 3 guy when it comes to April. So, surprise, stock boosted for Sidney Brown. And the biggest boost among defensive backs had to be Deonte Banks from Maryland. Talk about him just for a second. Ran a 4.35 40, 42-inch vert, and had an 11'4" broad jump. He was listed as a guy that's mid-second, maybe even early second if the corners start popping off early, which they very well could. Deonte Banks may have put himself up in the top 5 of that group. And then the biggest drop had to be Christopher Smith from Georgia. He's a safety. Now, he's already small, but he tested pretty bad, all things considered, and could fall out of day 2 contention and find himself on day 3 waiting around for his name to be called. And just like that, I think we covered everything I wanted to cover today. Now, we still went over an hour, so what can I say? Well, next week, if you couldn't tell, the SEC tournament's happening as we speak. March Madness Selection Sunday next week is going to be focused all about March Madness. There'll be some games that have already happened, like the play-in games on Tuesday, Wednesday, I believe. And then Thursday, there'll be some games already going on. I could probably talk about my bracket, but I would just love to go and talk about some of the matchups. So I'm going to get my research going the moment that starts on Sunday. All right. Again, Hawgin the Mic can be found on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, YouTube, of course, and again, I'll have to mention them on Red Wolf Radio. Thank you guys for listening there. If you want to follow me personally on Twitter, it is at bmichael, Michael, replace the I with a 1, and on Instagram at Brady_Michael with Michael the same way. If you made it this far with me, once again, I want to thank you for sticking around. It's another one of my long episodes. I don't apologize for it because you're the one that decided to stay. That being said, again, thank you all for listening, and I'll catch you guys next week for some March Madness discussion and probably some other things that need to get brought up. Until then, I'm Brady Michael, and I'm no longer hogging the mic. See you guys next time.